Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik K. We'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Kuf Mem Tes Amid Aleph. We pick up today on Kuf Mem Ches Amid Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, Siman Taf Kuf Chav Zayin, with the parentheses, the words of the Mefarish over here in the by the Ramah, where the Ramah explains, and we spoke about this a little bit yesterday, the exact mechanics of the eiruv tavshilin. How does an eiruv tavshilin work? So if you remember, I mentioned yesterday that we had this interesting machlokes, the Rambam and the Ravid, where the Ravid seems to hold that the word eiruv tavshilin, eiruv means to mix something together. So the Ravid seems to understand the eiruv tavshilin. What are the mechanics of the eiruv? You begin to prepare for Shabbos on erev Yom Tov. That's when you make your eiruv tavshilin. You set aside pas and a tavshil, a cooked dish. Many people use like a matzah and an egg. So you have pas and a cooked dish. You set that aside for Shabbos on erev Yom Tov. So you began your Shabbos preparations already on erev Yom Tov. Now, when you prepare food for Shabbos on Yom Tov, you're not beginning the work of preparing for Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's only a gemar malacha. You're only finishing the work that you already started on erev Yom Tov, and that's the mechanics that the Chazal use to allow you, like this, it would be an Isser D'Rabbanan to prepare for Shabbos on Yom Tov, but the mechanics that they use to allow you to do this is, since you started making the preparations on erev Yom Tov, you could finish the preparations for Shabbos on Yom Tov. So what's the word eiruv? You're mixing the preparations that you began on erev Yom Tov together with the preparations that you're making on Yom Tov. So it's an eiruv tavshilin. You're combining the cooking that you're doing on Yom Tov with the cooking that you did before Yom Tov for Shabbos. The Rambam learns differently. The Rambam seems to understand that the word eiruv and eiruv tavshilin is only a borrowed technical term from eiruv chatzeros. Just like by eiruv chatzeros, the eiruv is a mechanism. It's a mechanism that the Chazal employ to bear an Isser D'Rabbanan of carrying from the house to the Chatzar or vice versa. So too the eiruv tavshilin is a mechanic. It's a I'm not getting the right English word is not coming to me. It's a tool that the Chazal employed to be matir the Isser D'Rabbanan of preparing for Shabbos on Yom Tov. That's the only reason it's called an eiruv tavshilin, according to the Rambam. Over here we have the Ramah in the parentheses, 2 lines from the bottom on Kuf Mem Ches Amid Beis, where he says Pirush. What's the explanation of the eiruv? In Pirush Inyan eiruv Hu, the explanation of the concept of eiruv tavshilin is sheyavashel v'yoyfe miyom tov l'Shabbos, that it allows you to cook and to bake on Yom Tov for Shabbos, together with Mashe Bishel v'afa kfar me erev Yom Tov, what you cooked and what you baked already for Shabbos on erev Yom Tov l'shem Shabbos. So this sounds like the Ravid. We're combining the cooking and the baking that you do on Yom Tov for Shabbos together with the cooking and the baking that you did on erev Yom Tov for Shabbos, and that's why it's mutter. V'nimtza, it comes out shelo hischel malacha b'Yom Tov. You didn't begin any malacha for cooking or baking for Shabbos on Yom Tov, ela gamar oisa. You were only finishing it, and that the Chazal allowed you to do. Okay. Hagah, continues the Ramah here, last few words on Kuf Mem Ches Amid Beis. Hagah. Umuter lahaniach eiruv zeh. You're allowed to establish an eiruv tavshilin, afilu safek chashecha. Even if it's already late in the day on erev Yom Tov, and you're already at the time period of Bein Hashmashos, so it's already a suffix, maybe Yom Tov already began, you're still allowed to make an eiruv tavshilin, says the Ramah, in the name of the Mordechai at the end of Bameh Madlikin in Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cotton dalid near the bottom of Kuf Mem Ches Amid Beis. Afilu safek chashecha, you're allowed to make the eiruv tavshilin even if it's already ben hashmashas, even if it's already safek chashecha. Zman safek chashecha, what exactly is this time period? Nispar b'siman reish samach aleph sif aleph. We went through this in detail in Hilchos Shabbos, in siman reish samach aleph. Umavur sham, and we explained over there, the kishanirin shloisha kechavim beinanim, from the time that you could already see 3 medium-sized stars in the sky. Hu Vadai Laila, what we call Tzeis HaKechavim, is already Vadai Laila. That's already considered certainly to be nightfall, and then already Yom Tov has begun. The Kasva Achrayim, the Achrayim write, Dem Kibel Olav Yom Tov Ba'amiras Baruch Hu. If somebody already said Baruch Hu of the Yom Tov Ma'ariv, Shuv Ein Yachal La'arev, he can no longer make an eiruv tavshilin, even if it's still Tzeis HaKechavim. So if somebody's davening Ma'ariv before Tzeis HaKechavim Yom Tov night, now he already said Baruch Hu, even though the Ramah says that during Ben Hashmashas normally you could still make an eiruv tavshilin, but if you already started Ma'ariv and you already said Baruch Hu, the Achrayim, he brings this down, and if you look in the Sharetzion, he brings this down from the Magen Avram and others. They say if you already said Baruch Hu, it's too late. You can no longer make an eiruv tavshilin. Why? The Bekabalas Yom Tov, because by being Mekabel Yom Tov, through already saying Baruch Hu, Nechshav Azman Ki Yom Tov Vadai. That already makes it that for you it's already the Zman of Yom Tov Vadai. If you already said Baruch Hu of Ma'ariv, that means obviously you're saying that it's night. So then, in the context of you, it's already Yom Tov, you can no longer make it eiruv tavshilin. V'dafka b'kabolas Baruch Hu, shehu kabolas tzibur. However, the Chavetz Chaim says that this is only through Baruch Hu, because Baruch Hu is something that the tzibur says, so you already have the tzibur is davening Ma'ariv. The tzibur already said Baruch Hu, that's a kabolas Yom Tov of the tzibur. Va'afim hu lo yomar Baruch Hu. Let's say you went to shul to daven Ma'ariv, and you stepped out, so you didn't say Baruch Hu. But the tzibur, your tzibur, already said Baruch Hu. Nigrar achar hatzibur, you are drawn after the tzibur, and that constitutes a Kabbalas Yom Tov for you, and for you it's already Yom Tov. And even if it's not Tzeis HaKechavim yet, you can no longer make an eiruv tavshilin. Kamavur b'simin reish samach gimel sif yud beis. Aval Kabbalas atzmai. But let's say it's Yom Tov night, and it's still it's still not Tzeis HaKechavim yet. It's still Ben Hashmashas, so it's still the Zman of Suffolk. Even Afshe Kibel Beferish, if you made a personal Kabbalas Yom Tov, it's the time of Ben Hashmashas, the Tzibur didn't start Ma'ariv yet, and you said, I'm Mekabel Yom Tov, then the Chavetz Chaim says, Efshel Doloi Mahadil Inyan Zeh. It could be that Kabbalas Yom Tov, your personal Kabbalas Yom Tov, that took place during Ben Hashmashas, when it's Suffolk Yom, Suffolk Laila, maybe that doesn't have the effect of making it Vadai Laila and making it already Yom Tov so that you can no longer make an eiruv tavshilin. And it could be, he says, it could be that you could still make an eiruv tavshilin. And he continues over here on Kuf Mem Tes Amud Aleph, Ubishas Atchak, if it's a pressing circumstance, Af achar Baruch Hu, even if it's after Baruch Hu, even if the tzibur already said Baruch Hu, Kol zman shelo yispalalu hatzibur Ma'ariv, as long as the tzibur did not yet daven Shemayna Esrei of Ma'ariv, Yuchal La'arev, you could still make an eiruv tavshilin im lo chashcha adayin, if it is not yet Tzeis HaKechavim. So he seems to be coming out over here. He seems to be saying that if it's a shas atchak, you're going to need, you mamish didn't do any preparations for Shabbos, you're not going to have your Suda for Shabbos if you're not able to prepare the Suda on Yom Tov, and you forgot to make the eiruv tavshilin, and the tzibur already said Baruch Hu, but it's not yet Tzeis HaKechavim, so then you could still make an eiruv tavshilin. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, in Baal Hispalel Mincha, let's say you came to shul to daven Mincha, v'nizkar shelo yasa eiruv tavshilin, and you remember, oh no, I forgot to make an eiruv tavshilin. And if you'll turn around and try to go back home to make an eiruv tavshilin, you're going to miss shkia. You're going to miss the time of mincha. You're not going to be able to daven mincha. Yispalel mincha, he says you should daven mincha. And if you're going to run into a problem of eiruv tavshilin, if somehow you're going to, it's hard to picture the exact problem. You can't run home now, because if you run home now, you're going to miss shkia. So you got to daven mincha now, and somehow if you daven mincha now, you're going to miss Tzeis HaKechavim. Because if it was still Ben Hashmashas, we said if it's a Shas Atchak, you could certainly still make the eiruv. So it must be, it's some kind of a scenario where if you don't daven mincha, if you go home to make the eiruv tavshilin, you're going to mishkia. If you daven mincha, maybe you're far enough away from home that if you daven mincha, you're not going to make it back home before Tzeisak Yechavim. So he says, what should you do? You should daven mincha. What are you going to do about the eiruv tavshilin? You didn't make an eiruv tavshilin. How are you going to prepare for Shabbos? So he says, in your eiruv, you have another eitzah. What's the eitzah? Yakne kimchay la'acherim. You should be makne your flour to somebody else. What this means is, what are you going to do? You're not going to be able to cook for Shabbos on Yom Tov. You don't have an eiruv tavshilin. So what you're going to do is, you're going to take your beans, and you're going to take your barley, and you're going to take your flanken, and you're going to take your kishka, and you're going to give it all to somebody else who made an eiruv tavshilin, and he's going to put up your cholent for you. That's what he's going to do. It's going to be his. He's not doing it for you. He's not. I think we're going to see later in the Siman that if you didn't make an eiruv tavshilin, somebody else isn't allowed to cook for you. But over here, he's not cooking for you. He's cooking. You're giving him all the raw ingredients. They're his. He's putting up another cholent. Right? I think we're going to say that later. Yeah, it says in Sif Chaf, on Kuf Nun Aleph Amid Beis. So the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber in Sif Chaf, Misha la eiruv, somebody didn't make an eiruv, Kishem she'asa lavasha la'atzmai, just as he's not allowed to cook for Shabbos for himself, Kach asa lavasha la'acherim. He's not allowed to cook for anybody else. So if a caterer forgot to make an eiruv tavshilin, he can't go cook for other people on Yom Tov. He's not allowed to do any cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Va'afilu b'vei sam, even if he goes to their house and he cooks in their house. V'gam acherim asurim lavash aloi, and other people are not allowed to cook for him. Ve'ein loy takana, he has no takana, ela sheyiten kimchai v'tavshila la'acherim. What he could do is he could give his flour and he could give his uncooked dishes to somebody else. She'ervu, who made an eiruv tavshilin b'matana, he gives it to them as a matana. V'heim oifenu mavashlim, and they'll bake and cook. V'noistim loy, and they'll give to him, but they're not doing it for him. Okay, we'll see the greater detail of that when we get over there to Sivchaf. But that's what the Mishnah Berurah means over here. He says, "Oli inyan eiruv. What should you do? You don't have an eiruv tavshilin. How are you going to prepare for Shabbos? Yakne kimchay la'acherim. You should be makne your flour to somebody else who made an eiruv tavshilin, and he's going to go bake challah, and he's going to give you challah. Umiyu, nevertheless, im yachal asay seruvay agidei shliach. Let's say this fellow who came to shul and now it's holding by mincha." Right? And he realizes he didn't make an eiruv tavshilin and he doesn't have time to go home. Im yachal asay seruvay agidei shliach. If he could make the eiruv through a shliach, yishlach shliach lasay eiruv kadim sheyispal mincha. He could have a shliach go make an eiruv tavshilin for him. You could do an eiruv tavshilin through a shliach. Okay, now we don't go to Kuf Mem Tes Amud Aleph, the Mechaber in Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber, eiruv zeh, this eiruv tavshilin, oisen oisai bepas v'tavshil. An eiruv tavshilin is made out of two items. You need pas, you need some type of bread, so a challah roll or a matzah people use, and a tavshil. You also need some type of a cooked dish. Now this goes back to Gemara in Beitza, I think it's on Tezayin Amud Aleph, where the Gemara brings down that you need two things. You need a pas, you need some kind of a bread, because that's what's going to be matir afiyah. If you need to bake, if you want to bake on Yom Tov for Shabbos, you need to begin your baking on Erev Yom Tov. So you need a pas, you need a bread, that shows that already, okay, I started my baking already on Erev Yom Tov. And now if I bake on Yom Tov, it's a continuation of the baking preparation that I began on Erev Yom Tov. So that's why you need a pas. Then you need a tavshil, you need a cooked dish. So that's how you began your bishul, your cooking on Erev Yom Tov, and you can continue and finish your cooking on Yom Tov. Why do you need both? Because pashtus, bishul, and afiyah are not lumped together. Bishul is not included in afiyah. cooking is not included in baking, and afia, baking, is not included in bishul. It's not included in cooking. And the truth is, it's brought down. We have a raya in this from a pasuk. When the pasuk speaks about preparing the mun on Erev Shabbos, you got a double portion of mun, and you prepared it for Shabbos on Erev Shabbos. So it says, Eis asher toifu efu, whatever you're going to bake on Erev Shabbos. Ve'eis asher, what's the pasuk? Ve'eis asher tevashlu, bashelu, and whatever you're going to cook on Erev Shabbos. So you see that the pasuk felt that it had to mention both. It had to mention baking and cooking because they're two separate things. And that's why lechatchila we want the eiruv tavshilin to be made out of something baked and something cooked. And that's this machaber. Eiruv zeh oisen oisai bepas v'tavshil. Lechatchila we want you to have a pas, a baked bread, v'tavshil, and a cooked dish like an egg. V'im lo yasoi elam mitavshil avad. But b'di'evet, if you made the eiruv tavshilin only out of something cooked, so mutter, then it's mutter both to cook and to bake. If you made it b'di'evet only out of a cooked dish, that cooked dish will be matir you to do baking as well. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah over here. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in hay, bepas v'tavshil. Lechatchila you have to make the eiruv tavshilin out of a baked bread and something cooked. Tetzarech lefois ulevashel miyom tov l'Shabbos, because you're going to be baking and cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos. V'lachein, and therefore, oisen erev mipas v'tavshil me erev Yom Tov. That's why you have to make the eiruv tavshilin on erev Yom Tov from a pas, from something baked and something cooked. Shal smach zeh, because it's by relying on this erev, oifen you're going to bake, umevashlin, and you're going to cook achakach. So you need both something baked and something cooked in order to be matir both. I made a bracha before I started this year. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and vav. Let's say you made the eiruv tavshilin only out of a cooked dish. You didn't include a matzah. You didn't include something baked. Then the mechaber said, no, you only made it out of a tavshil, so b'di'evet mutter, you're allowed to both bake and cook on Shabbos on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut vav v'im lo yasai ela mitavshil avad, the me'ikar adin ain't tzarech ela mitavshil avad. Because the truth is, me'ikar adin, you only need a tavshil. Me'ikar adin, you could get away with making an eiruv tavshilin only with something cooked. Umahani, and it would be efficacious, bein lepas, bein letavshil. Both for something that you need to bake, like bread, and something you want to cook, like cholent. Shekenu das reiva paiskim, because that's what the majority of the paiskim hold. The majority of the paiskim hold that me'ikar adin, the ikar gezerah of eiruv tavshilin, was to have something cooked. And that allows you, it covers cooking and baking. Ela shenagu, but the minig is kedas ha-paiskim, like the opinion of the paiskim hamachmirin, who rule stringently, lahatzrich pas v'tavshil, who say that you need something baked and something cooked. V'lachein b'di'evet mutter, and that's why b'di'evet it's mutter if you only made it out of something cooked, because that's the ikar adin. Really, ikar adin, the ikar gzera was only something cooked. Now says the Chavetz Chaim, ve'im ein tzarech le'efos b'yom tov rak levashel. Let's say you know that you're not going to have to bake on Yom Tov for Shabbos. You already have your challah, you already have your cakes. The only thing you're going to have to do on Yom Tov for Shabbos is you have to put up the cholent. So you know you're not going to do any baking. Says the Chavetz Chaim, "V'mein tzarich lefeis b'Yom Tov v'rak lavashel." If you know you're going to have no need to bake on Yom Tov for Shabbos, and you're only going to have to cook, then af lechatchila sagi b'tavshil lechud. Then even lechatchila, you don't need the pas. You only need to have something cooked. L'kulei alma. Everybody would agree with that. Even the machmirim are maskim that if you did something cooked and you only need to cook, definitely the thing that you cooked will be matir cooking. You don't need to do baking. So fine, so you'll only do cooking. Eis cotton zayin, mutter. If you only made it out of a tavshil, it's mutter. What's mutter? Lefois ulavashil. Both to bake and to cook, b'Yom Tov b'shvil Shabbos, on Yom Tov Shabbos. So a cooked dish will b'di'evet for sure be matir both cooking and baking. Lechatchila, it will be matir cooking alone and not baking. Nevertheless, if you remember before nightfall that you only made the eiruv tavshilin out of something cooked and you didn't include something baked, tzarich lahaisef, you should add on to the eiruv laniach gam pas, and you should add on a pas. The Yomar, and you should say over again, Pahadein eiruva, with this eiruv, it's going to be mutter for me to prepare on Yom Tov Shabbos. Avalo yavarich shenis, but you should not make a new bracha. V'imasa pas levad. Now, how about the opposite case? We covered the case if you made the eiruv only out of something cooked. How about if you made the eiruv only out of something baked? What's the din then? Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'imasa pas levad l'tavshil bevadai loy mahani. It definitely would not cover cooking. V'imahani lepas lechud, and as far as whether it will cover baking, yesh deis ben ha-paiskim. Over there, the paiskim disagree. V'achreinim iskimu deloy mahani af lepas. The achreinim come to the conclusion that just something baked for the eiruv tavshilin will not even cover baking. Why? The ikar eiruv niskan mitavshil. Because the ikar din of eiruv tavshilin, the Chazal were misakin that an eiruv tavshilin should be made out of something cooked. That was the ikar gzera. So if you only have something cooked, so b'di'evid, it'll cover both cooking and baking. It'll even cover lechatchila, just cooking. But if you make an eiruv tavshilin out of only a baked good, then you weren't mekayim the takana of the Chazal. The Chazal were misakin that you should have something cooked. You only have something baked, it's not effective for anything. Now we go to Siv Gimel, says the Mechaber. Shear tavshil zeh kazayis. The minimum shear, the minimum amount of a cooked dish that you need for the eiruv tavshilin is a kazayis. And that kazayis covers you, says the Mechaber, bein le'echad, whether you're making the eiruv for one person, bein le'echad, bein la'alafim, or if you're making it for 1,000 people. You make an eiruv tavshilin out of a kazayis, you cover as many people as you want, bein b'tchilasai, bein b'soifai. And you need this kazayis both at the point at which you're originally establishing the eiruv tavshilin, you need a kazayis, and b'soifai. Let's say you made the eiruv tavshilin on erev Yom Tov, and then somebody went ahead and ate from the eiruv tavshilin. And now you have less than a kazayis of the eiruv tavshilin left, and you want to go make your cholent. It's the second day Yom Tov, it's Friday, you want to put up your cholent for Shabbos, you look at the eiruv tavshilin, you say, Baruch Hashem, I made an eiruv tavshilin. Then you go look at the eiruv tavshilin, and you see that there's less than a kazayis left of the eiruv tavshilin. Now you got a problem. You're not going to be able to cook anymore. You don't have an eiruv tavshilin around anymore. So you need a kazayis both in the beginning and at the end. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Kat Neches. Kazayis, you need a kazayis. Mishum hider mitzvah, because we want to beautify the mitzvah, yikach lechem shalem, you should make the eiruv tavshilin out of a shalem, so you should have a whole piece of matzah or a whole bilkala, not a piece. V'chatichas basar, and you should have a piece of meat, oidogim chashuvim, or a nice chash of a piece of fish. Nowadays, the minhag seems to be, for the most part, to make it with an egg. Okay. I've cut test, bein b'soifai. The Mechaber says you need a kazayis when you first establish the eiruv tavshilin, and you also need a kazayis at the end. The Chavetz Chaim asks, L'chara kavachomerhu. There seems to be a kavachomer. It seems to be very obvious. In bitchilasai sagi b'kazayis, if in the beginning when you first establish the eiruv tavshilin, it's enough to have a kazayis, kol shekenim haya yosev v'nisha kazayis. So certainly it's okay if you established it with more than a kazayis, and now you still have a kazayis left. Or rather, bala ashmiinam, the Mechaber is trying to tell you a different case. Da'af b'soifai, even if you set up the eiruv tavshilin on erev Yom Tov with more than a kazayis, but then it got eaten over Yom Tov, and now you have less than a kazayis, af b'soifai loisagi mipachas b'kazayis. Even at the end, even on the second day Yom Tov, when you want to go make your cholent for Shabbos, if you see that you don't have a kazayis, don't think that the eiruv tavshilin is still good. Because what do you mean? On erev Yom Tov, when I made the eiruv tavshilin, I had a kazayis. No, there has to remain at least a kazayis on Yom Tov. Otherwise, it's no good. Says the Ramah, third line down, Haga, V'yesh matzrichen lechatchila bepas. There are those that say lechatchila, that when it comes to the pas, when it comes to the baked portion of the eiruv tavshilin, kebetza. That lechatchila, you shouldn't only have a kezayis, you should have a larger share, you should have a kebetza. V'chein noyeg in lechatchila, and lechatchila would noyeg that way, that the baked portion of the eiruv tavshilin, the matzah or the bilkala, should be at least a kebetza. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting yod lechatchila. We're makbid on this lechatchila. Hay lechatchila, this lechatchila who rak kaidim sha'isa eiruv. That's only before you made the eiruv. Lechatchila, when you're ready to make the eiruv, you should make the eiruv out of a kibetza, of challah or matzah. Avalim kfar osa, but if you already made the eiruv tavshilin with less than a kibetza, you made the eiruv tavshilin with a kizayis, ein tzarich lachzor v'lasais, you don't have to go back now and redo the eiruv tavshilin by using a kibetza. Siv Daled. Says the Mechaber. Tzarich sheyehei tavshil zeh davar shehu roi lelafis bayas hapas. The food, the cooked portion of the eiruv tavshilin, whatever kind of cooked dish you're going to use for the eiruv tavshilin, it should be a davar that is roi, that is appropriate lelafis bayas hapas, to eat as I don't know if the right word is a condiment. When we think of condiment, we think of ketchup and mustard and relish. It means lalafis bayas hapas. It's something that you eat together with bread, meaning that the bread is the mazain, the bread is the filling portion of your meal, and this is an accompaniment. It's a chashuv dish that you eat as part of your suda, but not as the mazain. It's not as the filling portion. It's not the staple of the meal. The bread is the staple of the meal. This is a delicious accompaniment, another course that we eat in the meal, like meat, like fish, like eggs. And the Mechaber says, la'afuke, this stands in contrast to something like daisa. Daisa is some kind of like a cereal, something that's made out of grain, which is also the staple part of the meal. That's the carbs, that's the filling part of the meal. But it's not something extra, something special, a delicious additional course that you eat as another course together with the bread. Now the makar for this, the tam, not the makar, the rationale for this halacha, this also comes from the Gemara in Beitza, and Rashi says in the Gemara in Beitza that the point of this is, we need to see the tavshil. It needs to be muchacha milsa. It needs to be clear that you started your cooking for Shabbos on Erev Yom Tov. Now, if all you have is pas, let's say you would make your Erev Tavshilin out of a baked pas and then a cooked cereal, a cooked porridge, like daisa, which is also a staple. It's not lalafis bayas pas. Then we don't see clearly that you started your bishul for Shabbos. We don't see a chashuv, extra dish over here that you made special for Shabbos. No, we see pas. We see a carb. We see a filling staple, which you eat every day. Every day when you eat a meal, you eat something like that. If it's your oatmeal, so you eat more oatmeal for breakfast on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We don't look at this and see, he started his cooking for Shabbos. Masha ain't king. If we see a matzah and a beef stew, so okay, that's a davar lalafis bayas hapas. Then we see that you started cooking, you made a dish for Shabbos, even an egg. You'll ask me, an egg is not choshev. An egg could be you have eggs for breakfast every morning, but it doesn't matter. By the fact that it's a davar lalafis bayas hapas, it's not the staple filling component of the meal. People have egg salad Shabbos morning also. So that's muchacha milsa. That shows me it's something that was done in preparation of a meal, in preparation of the Shabbos meal. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Yod Aleph. Lalafis, it has to be an accompaniment to the bread. Kigan basar v'dagim ubeitzim, like meat, fish, eggs, ushare mini lifton, or other accompaniments, mevushalim, that are cooked, shadarka lalafis bayanas hapas, where it's the derech to use these as an accompaniment to bread. Maharil hayamunach habasar al teller. The the Maharil would make sure to put the cooked meat portion of the eiruv tavshilin on a separate plate together with the pas. V'loy al hagluska. He wouldn't just take a piece of meat and put it on top of the bilkala and put it in a bag and say that this is the eiruv tavshilin. Mishum mius. Because then the meat is going to make the chalim mos. It's going to get it fatty and moist and damp. So you don't want to make the eiruv tavshilin mos. So you put the meat on a separate plate. V'gam lokach lechem shalem, and he would make sure, like we said, to take a shlema, to take a whole piece. And then he would use it on Shabbos for the lechem mishnah by shalosh udas. Because why? The kevin is avid by mitzvah chada. Because since you used it for one mitzvah for the eiruv tavshilin, lisavid by mitzvah achrina. We should use it for another mitzvah. We should use it for the lechem mishnah for suda shlishis. Ice cutting yud beis. The cooked dish has to be something lalafis payas apas. The mechaber said la'afuke daisa. In contrast to something like a cooked cereal porridge. Hainu rifai shel sa'irim. This is some kind of grits made out of barley. Shekar gagalach. But it's something that's cooked. You took ground barley, maybe mixed it with some kind of liquid, maybe oil, eggs, and some spices, and you make, like in Yiddish we would say nakalach, little cooked things of balls of cooked grain. But that's essentially bread. Shein darkot shabnei adam lalafis beinas apas. That's not eaten as an accompaniment to bread. That's bread. Eloichlanaisam ba'asman kidei lizbaya k'may pas. That's the staple, that's the carbs, that's the filling portion of the meal. So essentially, it's like pas. Even if you'll tell me there are locales where they do eat that as an accompaniment to bread, that's not what the majority of people do, and therefore batla daiton. Their method of eating is bottled, it's nullified in comparison to the way everybody else does it. That's not the derech. So you can't use that as an eiruv. Usha'are mini kitnius, when it comes to other legumes like cooked beans or something, tali b'minig ha'makaymes, then it depends on the custom of that locale. Shebamakim she'em alaften menasapas, in a place where that would not be considered a lifton, it would not be considered an accompaniment to bread, rather it would be considered akin to bread itself. Also la'arev behen, then you would not be allowed to use it as the cooked portion of the eiruv. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should stand Gans Klal Yisrael in good stead. We're going to break over here. We'll start Mitzvah Hashem next time with Siv Hey. Thank you so much. Be well.